The first time I saw her, I forgot how to breathe. And when she caught me staring, she smiled as if she already knew every secret I had tried to bury. It was the second week of September, the kind of sweltering afternoon when the asphalt wavered like a mirage and the sky hung heavy with a hint of late summer storms. Our school's football field shimmered in the heat, the bleachers creaked with restless students waiting for practice, and Emma Carson, senior, honor roll kid, and chronic overthinker was supposed to be running laps. Instead, I stood frozen near the track's edge, my sneakers glued to the ground by something I didn't have a name for yet. Coach Morgan Hayes strode across the field like she belonged to every square inch of it. The sun lit her in a way that was almost unfair, her hazel eyes catching the light, her long ponytail swinging with a rhythm that seemed choreographed. She wasn't like the other coaches who barked orders or let their voices crack like whips. Her presence alone commanded attention, calm but unyielding, like the slow approach of a summer storm. I knew she was the new assistant athletic coach. The gossip had traveled faster than a cafeteria rumor. Former college soccer star, transferred from a prestigious program in California. Whispers of heartbreak trailed her like an invisible ribbon. Nobody knew the full story, only that she'd arrived abruptly, taking the job after a last-minute resignation. "Carson," she called out when our eyes met, her voice warm but firm. "You planning to run today, or are you auditioning for a statue competition?" The field erupted in laughter. My cheeks burned, but something in her half-grin felt like a dare. "I just waiting for the whistle," I mumbled, stumbling into a jog that felt more like a confession. From that moment, something inside me shifted. It was as though the air itself had thickened, charged with a current I couldn't explain. At home, Mom hovered in the kitchen, stirring a pot of chili while Dad watched the evening news. Our suburban house in northern Ohio looked the same as always: tidy lawn, faint smell of dryer sheets, but I felt unsteady, as though someone had tilted the entire neighborhood a few degrees. "So how's track practice?" Mom asked, tasting the chili. "Fine," I lied, pushing a slice of cornbread around my plate. It wasn't just practice. It was Coach Hayes, with the way her voice wrapped around my name like it belonged to her. It was the way her eyes lingered a half-second too long, or maybe that was my imagination feeding me dangerous hope. I went to bed that night and dreamt of the football field under the moonlight, empty except for her. She was standing in the center, hair untied, hazel eyes gleaming as though she carried a secret meant only for me. The next week, an early autumn storm rolled in. Gray clouds gathered above the track, the air heavy with the smell of wet earth. Practice turned into a scramble as rain sheeted down, soaking everyone in seconds. "Locker room now," Coach Hayes shouted over the downpour. We burst through the doors, dripping and breathless. The fluorescent lights flickered as thunder rumbled. "You okay?" Coach's voice came from behind me. I turned to find her closer than I expected. Rain clung to her lashes, a stray strand of hair plastered to her cheek. Her sweatshirt clung to her athletic frame, the scent of rain and something subtly sweet surrounding her. "I'm fine," I managed, though my heart thudded like a drum. Her gaze held mine for a beat too long. I wondered if she could hear it, the frantic rhythm of a truth I wasn't ready to name. "Good," she said softly, her lips curling in the faintest smile before she stepped back. The moment passed, but it left a ripple I felt in every breath. At school, whispers began. About the new coach's mysterious past. About why she'd left California in the middle of a championship season. Some said she'd been betrayed by a teammate. Others claimed a scandal involving a forbidden relationship. I tried to ignore the rumors, but they planted a seed of curiosity that only grew each time she looked my way. One afternoon after practice, I stayed behind to stretch, pretending to check my laces as the rest of the team filed out. Coach Hayes lingered, reviewing notes on her clipboard. "You run like someone who wants to escape," she said without looking up. I startled, heat rushing to my face. "Is that a bad thing?" She finally met my eyes, a half-smile playing on her lips. "Not if you know what you're running toward." Her words landed with a weight I didn't understand, echoing long after she left. Homecoming approached. The air sharpened with the crispness of October, leaves burning into shades of amber and scarlet. Our school's bonfire nighttime event of ritual chaos was a swirl of music, smoke, and teenage bravado. I wandered toward the quieter edge of the field, where the firelight softened and the night sky opened wide. And there she was, leaning against the fence, arms crossed, the flicker of flames painting her face in golden shadow. "You should be celebrating with your friends," she said. "I'm not really in the mood," I admitted. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded toward the dark tree line beyond the fire. "Sometimes it's easier to breathe away from the noise." We walked in silence, the crunch of fallen leaves under our feet. The bonfire's glow faded behind us until only the moonlight remained. "Why did you leave California?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her steps slowed. "Sometimes life becomes something you didn't sign up for," she said carefully. "And sometimes to survive you have to start over." I wanted to ask more, but the look in her eyes, a mixture of sorrow and resilience, silenced me. When she turned toward me, the distance between us felt fragile. The night air carried the scent of pine and smoke. Her gaze dropped briefly to my lips before she caught herself and stepped back, as if some invisible line had been drawn. "I should get you back to the fire," she said softly. The words were right, but the hesitation in her voice was a confession of its own. After that night, every encounter felt charged. A brush of her hand when she passed me a water bottle. The way her eyes softened when she corrected my running form. Each small moment carved a deeper space inside me, one I both feared and craved. But beneath the growing pull was a quiet dread. The knowledge that what I felt, what I wanted, might never be allowed to exist. I didn't know then that the heart is relentless, that once it chooses, no rulebook or whispered judgment can contain it. And as autumn deepened and the first frost silvered the grass, I would soon learn that love, no matter how impossible, has a way of finding its voice. The first frost of November spread across the track like a thin layer of powdered glass. My breath came out in visible puffs as I laced my sneakers, the cold biting at my fingertips. Most of the team had already retreated to the locker room, complaining about the chill, but I stayed behind, running slow laps until the sky began to darken. "Carson," Coach Hayes called, her voice cutting through the crisp evening air. "You planning to turn into an icicle out here?" I slowed, pretending I hadn't been waiting for her to notice. "Just one more lap." She stepped onto the track, hands in the pockets of her windbreaker. "You've already done more than the rest of the team combined. Come on." Hot chocolate in the faculty lounge. My treat. The invitation startled me. Coach rarely offered anything outside of practice, at least not to me. Is that allowed?" Her lips curved in a quiet grin. "It's just cocoa, Emma. Not contraband." The lounge smelled faintly of coffee and floor wax. A battered vending machine hummed in the corner. Coach stirred 2 mugs of cocoa, the steam rising in soft spirals. "Thanks," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. She leaned against the counter, studying me with those hazel eyes that always seemed to carry hidden storms. "You run like someone who's chasing something," she said. "Not just training. Something else." I looked down, tracing a finger along the rim of the mug. "Maybe I'm just trying to figure out where I'm supposed to be." "And have you figured it out yet?" "Not even close," I admitted. "Sometimes it feels like everyone else knows exactly who they are. And I broke off, searching for words. "Still running." Coach's gaze softened. "That feeling doesn't disappear when you graduate," she said quietly. "Trust me." Something unspoken passed between USA recognition, like finding a mirror in someone else's eyes. The following week brought the first real snow. It fell in thick, lazy flakes, blanketing the field and muffling the usual after-school chaos. Practice was canceled, but I lingered anyway, drawn to the stillness. Coach Hayes was already there, standing near the goalpost, her breath forming little clouds. She turned when she heard my crunching footsteps. "Couldn't stay away either?" she asked. "I like the quiet," I said. Snowflakes clung to her lashes. For a heartbeat, she looked less like a coach and more like someone caught in a dream, fragile, almost untouchable. "I used to love snow days," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Back in California, we never got this. It's like the world pauses for a moment." We stood side by side, silence settling around us like another layer of snow. My heart hammered with the awareness of how close she was. "Why did you really come here?" I asked, my words slipping out before I could stop them. She exhaled, watching the white cloud dissolve. "Sometimes the life you built isn't the life you need," she said. "And sometimes, You have to walk away before it destroys you. I wanted to reach out, to tell her she wasn't alone in that feeling. But my hand stayed buried in my coat pockets. Her eyes met mine, and something inside me cracked open, an ache and a recognition all at once. By December, the tension between us had become its own quiet language. A glance across the track. A brush of fingers as she handed me a stopwatch. It wasn't just me anymore. She felt it too. I saw it in the way her breath caught, in the slight hesitation before she spoke. The last day before winter break, we stayed late to pack equipment. The gym was nearly empty, echoes bouncing off the high walls. I won't be here for Christmas, Coach said, stacking cones. Visiting my sister in Chicago. Sounds nice, I replied, though my chest tightened at the thought of her leaving. You? She asked. Just family stuff, I said. It's complicated. Her hazel eyes softened. Families usually are. We stood there, the silence heavy with words neither of us dared to speak. The faint hum of the heating system filled the room. She reached out then, almost imperceptibly, and brushed a stray strand of hair from my face. The touch was feather-light, but it burned like a confession. Emma, she began, then stopped, her hand lingering for a fraction of a second before she pulled it back. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. She stepped away quickly, the moment vanishing like breath on a cold window. See you after break, she said, her voice carefully neutral. And just like that she was gone, leaving the scent of winter and something unspoken hanging in the air. Winter break blurred past in a hush of gray skies and restless nights. I checked my phone more than I wanted to admit, catching myself scrolling through old text threads as though Coach Hayes might have left some hidden message. She didn't. On New Year's Eve, the first snowfall of January drifted past my window like quiet confetti. I watched my family clink glasses at midnight, the TV counting down in a glittering frenzy, and I felt a hollow ache. My mind kept circling back to the way Coach had said my name, the way she'd almost spoken something before the footsteps in the hall cut her off. When school resumed, the air bit sharp as broken glass. I found her in the gym after practice, stacking mats. She looked up, startled, as if she hadn't expected anyone. Hey, I said, my voice low. Emma. She breathed my name like it carried more weight than it should. How was your break? Quiet, I said. Yours? Her eyes flicked away. Chicago was complicated. There was a pause. The gym smelled faintly of old wood and chalk. My heart pounded loud enough to drown the squeak of my sneakers. I kept thinking about before the break. I blurted, my cheeks burning. When she closed her eyes for a moment. Emma, I can't. Her voice wavered. You're my student. People would never understand. And if there are rules for a reason. I know, I whispered. But I can't stop thinking about you. The silence stretched, brittle as ice. When she finally looked at me, something unguarded flickered across her face, a longing she could no longer hide. She stepped closer, her voice barely a breath. Do you understand what this would mean? The whispers, the judgment. I don't care, I said, and it was the truest thing I had ever spoken. For a heartbeat we just stood there, the world narrowing to the soft rhythm of our breathing. Then she reached up and brushed her fingers along my cheek, a touch so careful it felt like a question. And then finally her lips found mine. It wasn't the frantic movie scene kind of kiss. It was slow, trembling, like two people standing at the edge of a cliff, finally daring to lean in. The taste of winter lingered on her mouth, cold and electric. When we parted, her forehead rested lightly against mine. I don't know what comes next, she whispered. Neither do I admitted. But I know what I want. She exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and fear. We have to be careful. For now this stays between us. I nodded. It wasn't a promise of forever, but it was something real, and it was ours. Over the next weeks, life moved in small, stolen moments. A glance across the track that felt like a secret handshake. The brush of her hand as she passed me a stopwatch. Each touch was a tiny spark, enough to carry me through the long winter afternoons. But secrets have weight. Whispers began to follow my classmates, noticing the way my eyes lingered when Coach spoke, the way she found excuses to keep me after practice. One late February evening, as the last light of day spilled through the gym windows, Coach pulled me aside. People are talking, she said quietly. We need to be careful. I don't want to hide, I said before I could stop myself. Her expression softened with both pride and worry. I don't either. But until you graduate, until you're no longer my student, we have to protect what we have. Her words should have stung, but instead they wrapped around me like a kind of fierce tenderness. She wasn't pulling away, she was protecting us. Spring thawed the edges of winter. The track turned from ice to mud to the firm ground of early March. College acceptance letters trickled in. Classmates chattered about dorms and majors. Life outside our secret bubble inched closer. The night before our final track meet, she found me sitting alone on the bleachers, the sunset painting the sky in streaks of gold and violet. Tomorrow's a big day, she said, sitting beside me. I'm going to miss this place, I confessed. Her hazel eyes caught the dying light. Change is hard, she said softly, but it's also how we grow. I turned to her, the weight of everything unsaid pressing against my chest. Will after I graduate, will we still? She reached for my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. If you still want this, she whispered, then yes. I'll be waiting. The world seemed to hold its breath. The sun slipped below the horizon, and for the first time in months, I felt the future open wide and bright before me. Graduation day arrived beneath a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. I caught her eyes across the field as I accepted my diploma, a quiet smile passing between us that no one else would understand. Later, as the crowd thinned and families drifted toward cars, she found me behind the bleachers. You did it, she said, pride shining through her voice. So did we, I replied, and before either of us could think better of it, I stepped into her arms. The hug was long and unguarded, the kind that belonged not just to a student and a coach, but to two hearts that had found each other against the odds. We still have a story to write, she murmured against my hair. And now, I said, pulling back to meet her eyes, we finally get to write it in the open. Her smile was quiet but certain. Together. And as the summer wind carried the scent of new beginnings across the field, I knew she was right. Whatever came next, college, distance, the inevitable challenge, us, we had already crossed the hardest line. We had found each other. And that was only the beginning. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.